Okay, thanks very much. I'm a television news journalist, as you've heard, so we're going to be quite casual and quite short and sweet, and let's talk and have a conversation rather, I think, than delivering your sort of your pre-prepared remarks. I think it would be really interesting to get some sort of dynamic going. So, but just to introduce you to everyone, over here I have Phillip Barton, he's the CEO of De Beers here in South Africa. We have Paschal Phelan, who's the CEO of Solar Capital, and over there we have Forsyth Mwache from Rand Water. So we've got, I think, the experience of everybody here. We really want to talk about the perspectives of South African CEOs in talking about climate change, and particularly in talking about the relationships between themselves and government. And I'm really interested to know whether South Africa offers inspiring opportunities to do more, or whether there is a limiting sort of framework, and what can be done to change that, and if not, what lessons these men can offer perhaps global CEOs in terms of what South Africa is doing right. So I think let's just kick off with a short explanation of where you and your company stand on this. Do you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go first. Thank you very much. I think we've got to start with the product that we mine. And most of you will know the slogan, "A diamond is forever." And we as a company are striving to make diamond dreams into lasting realities. And that takes something for each and everybody working for De Beers, and that is living up to diamonds. A diamond is a symbol of emotion, and that emotion is the emotion of love. So living up to diamonds is the purity of a diamond, symbolizing the purity of your emotion, so that when you put that diamond on a loved one's finger, that diamond comes with a message of zero harm to people who mined it, zero harm, which we'll define later on, to the environment, and zero harm to our product. If I bring that living up to diamonds closer to what we're talking about today, yes, we are a mining company, we're in the extraction industry, and we do destroy parts of the country that we work in. We also are large users of electricity through our plants, some of our electrical equipment, and then our earth-moving vehicles. Most of those run on diesel, and again, we know what diesel fuel and the usage of electricity do in terms of greenhouse gas emissions. So we'll talk later on about the work that we do to reduce that. And we don't see it as a challenge, we see it as an opportunity. Because as we drive our costs down, in driving our energy usage down, there is the imperative of an improvement on the bottom line. I think if I want to go to the next issue, that is an issue of water. Again, we use a lot of water in the recovery of diamonds. So again, a business imperative to reduce that water. And hopefully we'll explore a little bit later on the work that we do on that. And then my diamond dream, shared by many of my technical people, is eventually a waterless diamond recovery facility. And then lastly, De Beers very proudly, if you haven't heard about the diamond route, please go and read about it. It's a fantastic concept where we show the good that mining does. It's 9 properties that we are protecting around South Africa, about 250,000 hectares. So we manage about 6 hectares for every 1 hectare that we manage on the mining side. We're managing 6 hectares that we're conserving. Some of those properties have been in or has been owned by De Beers for over 100 years. And on those, a lot of research are done in conjunction with universities to try and see what the impact of climate change is on many aspects of the environment. So I think from our perspective, very much a business imperative, but with consequences that address our social well-being as well.
As you will gather, I'm from Ireland. I live in South Africa now for the past 12 years. And about 3 years ago, we established a solar capital, and it's an independent power producer established to take advantage of the renewable program that is commencing here in South Africa. And we have looked at various renewable programs and refit programs, as you will know them, around Europe. But we believe that the one in South Africa is truly inspired in terms of its approach and in terms of it being green. And being green, as most of you will agree, is community-based and comes from community. We have a tender system here, and 30% of the points out of 100 in the tender system come from your social and economic program. So you are required to put forward programs for improvement of the environment, improvement of people's lives and where you want to build a solar farm. And if you don't get that program attractive enough, you don't get your 30% and they throw the rest of your bid in the bin. You just don't get to participate. And that process is ongoing now in terms of they're expected, in fact, to announce the first bidders, hopefully later this week. Solar is very interesting from South African point of view. The solar irradiation levels in the north of South Africa are more than double what they are in Germany, and 35% greater than what they are in Italy, which is the two largest solar installations nationally, worldwide. And that means essentially for the same exact infrastructure cost, the same module cost, etc., we get a far greater amount of electricity out in South Africa. We have in these areas large tracts of infertile land, mainly because water is very scarce. And you have communities up there, communities of 10 to 20,000 people who are truly deprived communities where you have upwards of 75% unemployment. And the sun has been the bane of their life for generations because it's parched the land and it's made it difficult to live there. And now for the first time we're going to be able to harness the sun in terms of PV solar installations and create electricity that feeds back into the grid. That will generate jobs, local resources, and in a way go towards cranking these communities back into life again because they are fairly hopeless situations. We in Solar Capital have seen that we need to involve these communities, etc., in our programs, and we involve the communities and black empowerment in up to 40% of the equity of these projects. And these projects are not small. They're about 2 billion rand each project for 75 megawatts of PV solar. So believe me, the other 60% makes a very, very viable business, but we are seeking to improve the lives of these communities. And when we build a solar farm has a longevity of a minimum of 30 years. So we're going into these communities which have virtually nothing in them, and we want to become part of them and part of their future and help turn around the dire positions that they're in at the moment.
Thank you. And for you, I mean, I think all of us understand that climate change is going to increase water-related business risks. How do you, looking forward, help these guys to manage that?
Thank you very much. It is correct that according to some of the risks that have been identified from Randwater's perspective, climate change is one of them. We are saying that because climate change is going to affect the availability of the resource. If we do not have a drought, we will be hit by floods. And from an operations point of view, if you have floods, what you will have is that there will be an increase in turbidity. Increase in turbidity means an increase in cost of production. The converse is true if we have got floods. I mean, if we have got drought, it means that we do not have sufficient water to draw from the resource. We may have to come up with techniques such as coming up with a reduction in procurement from the resource. But I should hasten to indicate that we are providing a resource access to which is the right. which means that you cannot necessarily exclude people from from accessing the resources simply because of inability to pay. So from the South African side, from the constitution side, access to water is a basic right. I should also indicate that in order for economic growth to be actualized, you need a sustainable and strong bulk water services provision. Ourselves, as established and supported by the shareholder, which is the Minister of Water Affairs and Environment, we are appreciative of the fact that water, as has already been mentioned by my other colleagues here, panelists, is a scarce resource. And South Africa is one of the driest countries. It falls squarely amongst the driest countries in the world, which means that we have to optimize the water that we have in order to reach as many people as possible. We operate primarily within Gauteng, where we provide water services to over 11 million people, and we are currently making our inroads into other provinces as well.
Okay, so before we sort of kick off the debate as such, I want to just ask you to sort of give me a rating out of 10 in terms of the way South Africa creates a platform for really positive climate change related innovation or decision making. And if you can just give me a sense of really in terms of the way this country for you as a business offers you opportunities out of 10.
I would at this stage, let me go sit right on the fence and put it at 5. And I think that on the one hand, a good analogy for me is the analogy of corporate governance, where you can either legislate it and then people will have to comply and then eventually realize the good of it, or you can get somebody to voluntarily subscribe and then realize the good. And I think we at the moment are sitting in both courts. We haven't fully we're not fully regulating the concept, but we are starting. And I think if one can create an environment where this is a voluntary process driven by business imperative with the consequences, then eventually you will have enough of, let's call it a snowball effect, to see the benefit of that and get it running, rather than to get punitive into legislating it, because in my mind you will not have the sustainable change that you want.
I would give it 9 out of 10 in terms of the renewable energy program. 3 years ago we didn't have one. People and government and business sat down and studied how much energy is South Africa going to need by 2030. And we have approximately 35 gigawatts of energy at production, and that's going to rise to about 85 gigawatts by 2030. And then they simply planned a program. Where is it going to come from? There's still some debate over it because there's quite a bit of nuclear in there still, and there's quite a bit of coal. But
that's an understatement.
Yes, but there's still, nevertheless, there's 30% of it not legislative, policy planned at this stage to come from renewables. And it has the caveat that if we can get renewable prices and the price of renewable energy down, more of it will come from renewables. So I think it's a truly inspired program. The reason I don't give them 10 out of 10 is that there's a slight scholastic approach with government being the schoolmaster in terms of telling us how we should do it, how we shouldn't do it, second-guessing all of our decisions, and getting lost in paperwork whilst they're trying to work out how we don't lose money or put up wrong forms and create embarrassment for them, which I believe should be left to the marketplace, and I think the process would go a lot faster and a lot smoother if they'd done so.
Okay.
Yes, in as far as water legislation and policy are concerned, I would rate 9.2 out of 10. My reason is, in South Africa, different from other parts of the country, we have got 2 pieces of legislation that regulates water use. We have got the National Water Act that talks to the protection of the water resource, and then we have got the Water Services Act, which regulates the provision of water from the rivers up to the end consumers through the overall value chain.
So I think the question is, and I think it's important on maybe on all levels, but particularly when it comes to something like mitigation or adaptation when it comes to climate change in the next 10, 20, 30 years. Is it preferable to be over-legislated, to have a very clear direction, a very top-down approach from national government, like, say, the Chinese do, who, you know, really tell people you have to meet these emissions targets or cap on certain levels? Or do you think that this more organic, market-based approach is going to be more successful?
The fact that our minister is the Minister of Water Affairs of South Africa is the lead negotiator at COP17 currently already evinces the fact that from the water side, we're very, very, very clear. There is no ambiguity. We have got the National Water Resource Strategy, which is established.
But does that create inspirational solutions to the problems?
It does create.
Does the legislation
yes.
kill that, or does it create that?
From our side, on the water side, we're very clear. It helps us. It enables us.
For you, sir?
The goals have been laid out by President Zuma. They're very, very ambitious. Most people will say they cannot be achieved. We've had a very encouraging start, but there was a caveat to the goal, and that is we didn't pollute the world in South Africa. Places like China and America are doing it and continue to do it, and there has to be a transfer of resources in terms of achieving it. And I think we have had another talking jamboree for 2 weeks here in Durban, and we're going to have one in Rio, and there's still nothing done. Everybody wants to move $100 billion around. I suspect that came from the Americans as a way of making sure to never move, right? To make the number big enough. They need to look at...
Sorry, are you cynical about this?
I'm not cynical. I just see the needs in the places...
So why are you here then? Why did you even bother coming to Durban? What's in it for you?
Because if we don't start making a voice in terms of, say, why can't this thing be made practical? We're the business people, right? We're not the greenies. We want to be able to do good, do well, and make money, absolutely. But if we go into these communities with the view of not making money, then where's the money going to come from? So if we're going to get change, then we need to be able to make money, we need to be able to innovate, we need to be able to reduce the costs, etc. But there is a key issue still, that if you want real movement in Africa and in South Africa, then start transferring some of the resources down here and we can make a difference.
But beyond that, before we start talking about green climate funds and 100 billion shifting, I mean, that is way down the line. Now, if something isn't done in the next 5 years, what does Ban Ki-moon say? You know, we're going to be dealing with out of control climate change. This is the moment to be ambitious. It's the point of no return. The people here need to bring us back from the edge. And if you're saying that we have to wait in a way for this money to help South Africa adapt or mitigate, it's going to be too late. It's businesses on the front lines who are having to make decisions now. And isn't that more important and perhaps more powerful than what's going on over there?
No, I would say that, okay, you got to put everything in context. During the week on my COP book on my way down to Durban, I read and I remembered approximately the Americans are producing 5 million tons of CO2 a year and the Chinese are about 5 million. Today I hear the Chinese are now 6.8 and going to 13 within the next couple of years. I mean, we're 360 million in South Africa. So I'm afraid at the rate they're going at, we're not going to make a difference and the ship is going to sink and take us all down.
So then why bother? It's Armageddon. Why bother even trying to turn the lights off?
Well,
if the Chinese
at the rate they're going, it is going to be Armageddon. And that's the message that we have to get across, that Mr. Obama can't sit in the White House and Mr. Jintao in his house and say, leave it to the Africans.
So then what is the imperative for a company here in South Africa to do something if the enormity of this is so overwhelming?
You know, I think for me, starting off with what Paschal has said earlier, you know, we get a strategic direction, and I think the South African government have been very clear on that, and then we can all, you know, sit and wait for something to happen down the road, or we can start in our own small way. And I think that is important, that we should not, we've got a broad direction on the what, so let's not wait for the world to tell us the how as well. And I think that is something from our company. We're on the ground, so it's a perfect opportunity to work, start even small, working with our communities just on water. We're working with the community in Limpopo, in the Limpopo Basin. We're working with SANParks. We're working with WWF. We're working with the Peace Parks Foundation, the Messina community, on a water management plan. It's an integrated plan to start looking how do we mitigate the risk of this scarce resource that's getting scarcer, on how we utilize that best. So if we start in our own way, I think we are going to make a lot of progress on the ground in terms of the in terms of the how, and hopefully pave the way in terms of the bigger picture.
I support that point of view completely. You know, everything that you see big today started small. So the cumulative effect of the various organizations saving the electricity on a small scale, for argument's sake, can add up to a very a considerable amount. We from the Rainwater side have taken an approach now, a technique, in respect of which we are now pumping during off-peak time, when demand for electricity is low.
And it's cheaper.
And it's cheaper. And then it enables us to save whilst we're filling up our reservoirs. That is very important. And if everyone else can not wait for the outcome of COP17, wait for the declaration before they come up with these techniques, on a small scale we can make a difference.
Again, though, I'd still like to explore. It seems the more I walk around COP and look at the various pamphlets, there are a lot of high-profile business people here, a lot of global companies, and it's wide-ranging, from the investment banks to the big diamond houses. Why are you here? What do you want from COP? Is there something? Is it this kind of forum? Is there something that you can learn from this experience?
Yeah, I think we're definitely here to learn.
But what?
I think we're here to learn from other people's experiences. How they've approached it, what are their problems, and then I also think we're here a bit to share some of our learning, and then hopefully somebody else will build on it. Because I agree with my colleague on my right, that if we start small and we work together, this is not a competitive issue. This is an issue where we work together and build on it, and we'll build this from the top, from the bottom up. Maybe something will happen at the top and we'll meet each other halfway.
That's sort of the best case scenario, isn't it?
Why am I here? Well, I have a 10 billion rand program over the next 5 years in terms of installing PV solar farms in the Northern Cape. We are secure in that we're not like the Europeans, where if government catches a cold, they turn off the tap. Because there's one big difference in South Africa. We need to keep the lights on, right? And we've had our challenges in terms of doing so. So any energy that can be produced in South Africa is going to be used and going to be very much needed. And that's the scenario for the next 10 years at least. So I'm here to meet people who want to invest in South Africa and not just get a darn good internal rate of return, but also get a social payback in terms of taking hopeless communities and putting in these things and improving them.
So the kind of work both of you are doing, and you, I mean, what can a global CEO coming here, someone from Morgan Stanley looking to invest, I mean, what would they take from a South African company that is perhaps different from an Indonesian company or a Brazilian company or those countries themselves?
There is a proportionate relationship between water availability and mobilization of domestic investment to leverage foreign direct investment. The first thing that an investor looks or considers when they seek to make an investment decision is whether water is available. And we from Rainwater side, we are saying, because we are a sustainable bulk supplier of over 100 years if you want to invest in our area of supply in terms of legislation, you are guaranteed returns. Because without water, you cannot, we can forget, we will not have FDI inflows. All the investments that we currently have will be crowded out.
You look like you're poised to say something.
No, in terms of, we've exactly the same thing on electricity availability. And I had a sister of mine, she's the CEO of one of the large American corporates in Europe. And about 2 Christmases ago, we were chatting, and they have a call center in the Philippines, and they have call centers in the States. The States had some storm, the Philippines had some floods, and she spent her Christmas pulling her hair out as to how to solve the problem. And she said, look, this is perfect. You don't have tsunamis, you've Cape Town. And they went off, and they encouragingly done a big report, and she came back and says, you can't operate a telephone system if you have no electricity. And that finished that idea, because we have blackouts. And so if we're going to create sustainable jobs, and there's a major emphasis now for the last couple of years on jobs, you can't have the jobs unless you have the electricity and the energy resources. And to a certain extent, the same for water.
When it comes to powering mines and such a big operation as yours, is that for you the biggest challenge, whether we're talking about sustainable energy or not?
I don't want to make anything the biggest challenge. I think we've got a lot of challenges, but you know, power certainly is high up on our risk log of what we're managing in the country, and I think the mining industry in South Africa is, I don't want to call it an easy target, but we're well organized. So a couple of years ago, when the country faced the blackout, it was very easy to get the mining industry within a very short period of time to basically switch off our energy usage and take the pressure off the national grids. So it is a real a risk for us that we are managing and that we continue to manage.
And we talk about energy because South Africa is the biggest producer of coal in the world. A lot of South Africa's energy is dirty, and we're actually probably one of the dirtiest energy users in the world. So the question is, again, that the question about development or clean energy. And I think a lot of people feel it's an either-or scenario, and a lot of other people say, listen, it's really dangerous to think like that. How does South Africa, with this huge energy deficit, try and balance that development between growth and green?
In terms of, I don't think there's a contradiction. You see, we misunderstand our cost of electricity, and we've had some of the lowest costs of electricity in South Africa. And we can sustain low cost electricity because all of our infrastructure is over 20 years old. And if you look at Eskom's balance sheet, there ain't much depreciation. So, and the cost of funding and the cost of capital is your single biggest cost in terms of energy production. So we're going to continue to have growing prices in terms of the cost of energy, without a doubt whatsoever. And as the price of renewable is coming down, the price of coal and similar is going up. And we're not too far off meeting, I would say, 2015, 2016. And then introduce carbon tax, and you get a proper level playing field against fossil fuel, and then renewable energy will come into its own in very dramatic volumes.
Okay. I can open the floor. If anybody wants to ask some questions of any of our panelists, please do raise your hand. Anybody? There we go. You, sir.
Bruce from WWF. Just a question from the gentleman who's developing renewable energy projects in the Northern Cape. What is your experience? In the previous panel, we had someone from Eskom speaking, and I was just wondering what your experience was and your perception of the presentation from the previous presentation.
I didn't actually see the previous presentation. But Eskom is the core of energy production in South Africa, and will continue to be for generations. But I saw Deloitte and Touche produced a report last year which said that if we had a carbon tax coming in at the rate was being discussed in government, then Eskom's bill would be 37 billion rand per year. So in terms of, there's a big alignment coming in terms of producing so much electricity from dirty coal.
Anybody else? Let's talk about, you can interject as we go on, but I think the question I'd also like to ask is sort of on a regional level. South Africa is obviously the major player here in Africa in terms of its economy, but how does working, say, De Beers in Botswana, for example, is there a difference in the way the Botswana or the Namibian governments deal with the issue of climate change?
I think we should look at it from a Southern African region, and we as De Beers, and now I'm talking broader than just De Beers Consolidated in South Africa, taking a similar approach in these countries and trying to influence the way that we go. Because if we look at both Botswana and Namibia, water is an even bigger issue there. On the Namibian side, we've already explored and are working with seawater, using that through our recovery facilities. But Botswana, water is the major issue that drives us there. Botswana's
and rather controversially so as well.
Controversially so, and you know, if you look there at energy, Botswana is also a coal-rich country, and you know, generating what we call what you called earlier dirty energy. And something that I should have touched on earlier is that on our Namaqualand facility up on the west coast, we are in the process with third parties of constructing wind farms to add into the grid. And in the Kimberley area, where we've got a lot of sunshine, being Northern Cape as well, solar parks that will feed into the grid. And these are initiatives that our sister companies in both Botswana and Namibia are looking at as well.
Okay, and for you, sir, on a regional level, I know Rand Water is quite located within Gauteng, but the interconnectedness of water is so basic. And how do you plan ahead for 50 years' time? If there really is the sense that water as a resource is essentially under dramatic threat?
Yeah, we draw, our main source is from the Vaal River, which is actually from the Orange River, which rises in Lesotho. So from the South African side, we have got what they refer to as the Joint Water Commission. In terms of this Joint Water Commission, it regulates the sharing of water within this resource. So from the Rand Water side, we are actually drawing from an international source. So the South African government has made it a point that there will be a scarcity of, there will be assurance of water supply in terms of the agreement for Lesotho phase 2. So we will continue.
Global warming doesn't listen to policies and assurances of water supply. I mean, if there's over 2% increase in temperature, so that's not assured.
Within any shared water course, there are what is referred to as operating rules. So in the event of the flows diminishing, the amount of water that can be drawn from the source also gets reduced proportionately. So that has been taken care of in terms of the existing legislation and policies.
Do a lot of people spend a lot of time thinking or worrying about this at Rand Water?
Yes, as part of the strategy of Rand Water, we have approved the Rand Water a strategy that looks over a 30-year period. One of the issues pivotal to the strategy is the issue of water availability from a quantitative point of view. Where are we going to get the water from? Hence, that is why we're coming up with a strategy of water conservation and demand management, in terms of which we have to ensure that we optimize on the available water resource in order to reach as many of the communities as possible.
For you, I mean,
those strategies failed in the energy and the electrical business until the lights started to go out, and that's only when we started to get a focus. And now, in terms of solutions, we, however, see the cost of renewable energy, and particular PV solar, just going down on a straight graph in terms of cost. And at a certain point, desalination will become a commercial enterprise in terms of converting solar into electricity to drive the desalination plants.
So when you look at this, particularly the South African environment, do you see a model appearing that other countries can hopefully learn from? You're talking about all these different complicated cross-pollination of different resources.
Without a doubt. We have the solar resource, we have the land, and for example, one of the small innovations that our company has designed, our team have designed, is that if you point a solar module at the sunshine, and let's say you get 100% in terms of its electricity, if you move it once a year seasonally, manually, you get 105%, right? So in small little simple innovations, and a 5% increase in your electrical output compared to the cost of moving it, and you're creating jobs, is quite dramatic. So I think you're going to see innovation coming out of South Africa that is going to lead.
And to bring the Eskom issue back again, I mean, none of this, if say you creating excess energy with one of your solar panels, or some of your solar panels, a lot of that energy can be put back into the grid, into the system, and that's, people who do that are giving it back for free. Does there not be some sort of commercialization of that energy? If this all becomes very successful, what about these sort of basically commercialization of this free energy that is created by renewables?
I have no doubt whatsoever that it's going to become highly successful and world leading, because we have to do it. We need the energy, right? And remember, the South Africa energy demand market is unusual in that the energy is required from sort of 7 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock in the evening with very little peaking, unlike Europe or America, where it's big in the morning and big in the evening and you have an off-peak. But because of the level of industry demand in terms of electricity, it actually, the peak period is the sunshine period. So you don't really have periods of down demand in terms of the interface between industry and solar energy in South Africa.
Any other questions from our audience, particularly about the South African experience? I know there are a lot of plans, a lot of legislation. Is it just plans, or is there enough action in terms of what could be achieved? Are there any examples that any of you would like to offer or suggest to any of our panelists? You, sir. Over there.
Hi, I'm Issa Basha from Growth Point Properties. We're the largest listed property company in South Africa. Now, I agree with the gentleman that we need the solar farms and the wind farms, but that's a long-term strategy. Currently, there are plenty of rooftops in South Africa, and smaller projects with rooftop solar is likely to be more successful in the short term while we plan for the long term. Now, we've currently just done a pilot project as a joint venture with Eskom to evaluate the potential for rooftop solar, and so far it's been very, very successful. What are your comments on rooftop solar?
In terms of rooftop solar in the States is actually more than the large farm solar. South Africa needs energy, and it needs it quickly. And we have the capability to install about 10 megawatts a month in terms of installing it out in the open areas. Certainly, rooftop solar has been very successful around the world. And what you've got to do is motivate government to give you an in-feed tariff, because it will not work unless you get an in-feed tariff. But believe me, it takes a lot of roofs, and you would be surprised how, if you look at the rooftop space in South Africa, it's actually quite small on an international level.
Maybe just a quick comment from our side, and I want to emphasize the start small again. In terms of our Venetia mine, Messina, where we operate, there again, we've worked with our employees, and as a company, have equipped all of our properties there with rooftop solar. So a small contribution, but again, a beginning.
I think what's very relevant there is, and just to answer your question around the bigger farms, there's a whole issue around environmental impact, food security. You don't have that problem with rooftops. And I disagree with you that we have very little rooftops. Yes, maybe in the office sector, but if you look at industrial, if you look in parking lots in retail, there's significant amount of space to be able to put up solar without having the same challenges as you would have identifying land that could potentially be used for agriculture.
The Department of Agriculture here is very, very careful in terms of allowing agricultural land to be used for anything other than agriculture. But once you move up to a certain point, call it if you take a line 4 or 5 hours north of Cape Town, it's no longer agricultural land. They kind of have 1 sheep per 30 hectares, right? So it is suitable for solar and doesn't impact in any way the agricultural aspect. The environmental aspect is slightly overcooked in that these things are 1.5 meters off the ground, but we did still have to get an aviation certificate when we were making our tender recently. So it can be taken a little bit too far. Yes, if you have an 80-meter wind mast, then you may have environmental attitude, if you like, but not for something that's 1.5 meters off the ground in terms of creating energy. But the rooftop sector is a very valid sector, but people have to get up and go and do it.
You, sir. There's someone behind you.
My question is to Mr. Barton. One of the problems that we have in India in mining, and obviously not diamond mining, but coal mining and other minerals, is that what do you do with the degraded land once the mines are closed? What is the experience in South Africa? Because politically it's becoming very difficult in India to allow new mines to come up, because they say you're going to degrade this, the whole environment around the mines. Could it possibly, for example, be used for solar panels to be put on top of the used mines?
I think it's a very, very good comment. Unfortunately, we're not mining for diamonds in India, but we've got a significant exploration program and hoping to find a diamond mine soon in India. I think our legislation is pretty clear in South Africa, and you know, at one day I hope to share a case study with you, a mine that we've built with closure in mind, working very closely with the Department of Mineral Resources. It was a project that had an 8-year life, and the way that we built it in terms of soft topsoil, rock dumps, etc., to make the rehabilitation very, very easy. Some of the older mines where our forefathers didn't have the foresight to build a mine with rehabilitation in mind, that poses a challenge. And again, we've worked very closely with the Department of Mineral Resources in looking at land where you dug down to bedrock in alluvial mining. To put up a wind turbine, you need to anchor it on bedrock. So why fill it up just for somebody else to go and dig it up again to anchor it on bedrock? So there we've engaged with companies like Eskom and other companies to explore the opportunities, and we've been successful in attracting third parties to actually utilize that land. Instead of rehabilitation, it is actually ready for wind turbines. Similarly, in our Kimberley area, there are areas that we've rehabilitated to a certain degree, and which was at that stage perfect for a solar farm. And again, the trade-off is there, that the benefit is better for or the benefit from solar farming is better than rehabilitated to its original condition. So there are practical ways of matching these, but again, one is going to work closely with communities and with government to ensure that it is the right outcome at the end of the day.
Thank you. My name is Lefadi Makibinyani. I'm the non-executive director of Rainwater and also the executive director for Tshwane Metro Municipality. I just want to actually impart some information that Rainwater's strategy is not only on bulk. They are actually looking at the bulk sanitation as well, in addition to bulk potable water. So they want to actually oversee the whole value chain of water from source to source. And I think that will give them the leverage of actually ensuring the security of supply of water in South Africa. As you know, that many of the wastewater treatment works are managed currently by the municipalities and are not well managed. So I think the strategy of Rainwater to go bulk route at the end of the day is to put the whole value chain under their watchful eye, and as a result to influence, the security of water supply in South Africa. We know South Africa is not one of the countries that recycle water. We just use water once, throw it away, and as a result, there is no conscious, attention towards our wastewater treatment works. You find that we discharge, the effluent that is not properly treated into our waterworks, as a result polluting our water sources. So we need a conscious decision towards that to ensure that we don't pollute our water sources, and we can recycle that water, treat it again for human consumption. I think that will go a long way in ensuring security of supply. On the energy side, as municipalities, we are exploring better energy efficiency approaches to ensure that Eskom at the end of the day doesn't become burdened with bringing in coal-fired power stations again. So there are a lot of energy efficiency initiatives, like the smart grid. In Tshwane, we are actually spearheading the smart city, smart grid concept, where we can actually regulate how the consumer utilizes his energy. We can control, we can monitor, we can connect and disconnect the consumer remotely. So those are the type of technologies that we are advancing, and that will actually ensure that people become conscious on the utilization of energy, and then we can conserve the resources, or the limited resources that this country has. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that was our last question, unless we can squeeze one more in. One more? Is that it? That's it. Fine. All right. I think just from my point of view, I think I'm going to quote Ban Ki-moon again. He made a very impassioned speech this afternoon, and his one line was, "Now is the time to be ambitious." And I think that really is what is needed. Thank you very much to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.